At 3 a.m., under complete darkness, I sat inside a bulldozer staring at the only road that connected an entire HOA neighborhood to the outside world, and within the next few minutes, I was about to tear it apart piece by piece while every single person living there had no idea what was coming. And the craziest part is, everything I was about to do was completely legal, because that road sat on land I had just inherited, land they had been using for years like it belonged to them. Now, before I tell you how this even got to this point, make sure you hit like and subscribe to Karen's Stories Daily if you enjoy stories where entitled people push things way too far and end up facing consequences they never expected. Because this one builds slowly but hits hard when everything finally comes together. So this all started when I got a call that completely changed my life. My uncle had passed away. We were not extremely close, but we stayed in touch. And I knew he owned land out in a rural area just outside a growing suburban development. What I did not know was how much land he actually owned. When everything was processed, I found out I had inherited just over 1,000 acres. At first, it did not even feel real. I had lived a pretty normal life, steady job, small apartment, nothing fancy. Suddenly, I was the owner of a massive piece of land that had been in my uncle's name for decades. He was the kind of person who bought land when it was cheap and just held onto it. A few days later, I decided to go see it for myself. I drove out early in the morning, and as I got closer, I started noticing something strange. There was a large, clean neighborhood built right near the center of what I knew should have been part of that land. Nice houses, well-maintained lawns, a clear sign at the entrance with the HOA name on it. At first, I thought maybe I had misunderstood the property boundaries. But when I checked the documents again, it was very clear. That entire neighborhood, or at least the land it was sitting on, was originally part of my uncle's property. Over time, pieces had been sold off legally. But not everything. There was one detail that stood out immediately. The main road leading into the neighborhood cut straight through a section of land that was still fully part of the property I had just inherited. That road was not public. It was not owned by the city. It was private land. My land. At first, I did not think much of it. I figured there had to be some kind of agreement in place, maybe an easement or a legal right-of-way. So I started digging into the paperwork, and what I found was surprising. There was no formal, recorded easement for that road, which meant technically, the entire neighborhood was relying on access that they did not legally secure. Still, I was not looking for conflict. I just wanted to understand the situation. So I decided to introduce myself to the HOA and figure things out the right way. That was my first mistake. I went to one of their scheduled meetings. I kept things simple. I introduced myself, explained that I had recently inherited the surrounding land, and mentioned that I wanted to clarify the situation regarding the road. The reaction I got was not what I expected. Instead of concern or even curiosity, I was met with immediate defensiveness. The HOA president, a man named Richard, cut me off before I could even finish explaining. He told me that the neighborhood had been using that road for years and that it was not going to change. He spoke like it was already settled, like I was the one stepping out of line just by bringing it up. I tried to stay calm. I explained that I was not trying to block access. I just wanted to make sure everything was legally clear and properly documented. But Richard was not interested in discussion. He said something that stuck with me. He said, "This community is not going to be held hostage by someone who just showed up." That was the moment I realized this was not going to be a simple conversation. Over the next few weeks, things got worse. I started receiving letters from the HOA, not friendly ones. They were written as if I was violating their rules, even though I did not live inside their community and was not part of their association. They claimed my land was affecting community standards. They complained about natural overgrowth, about how parts of the land were not being maintained to their liking. They even tried to fine me for land that I owned and that was not under their authority. At first, I thought it was a misunderstanding. So I responded politely, explaining again that I was not a member of their HOA and that they had no jurisdiction over my property. That is when things turned aggressive. I started noticing people entering my land without permission, survey flags being moved, sections near the road being altered slightly, almost like they were trying to slowly claim more space. Then one day, I saw something that made everything clear. They had started placing decorative markers along the road, making it look like it was officially part of their neighborhood. That was not just disrespectful. That was an attempt to establish control. So I decided it was time to stop assuming good intentions. I hired a property lawyer and had a full survey done. The results confirmed everything. The road, from entrance to exit, was entirely on my land. No recorded easement, no legal right of way, nothing. Which meant I had full authority over it. Now here is where most people expect the story to turn into instant revenge. But that is not what happened. I still gave them a chance. Through my lawyer, I sent a formal notice to the HOA. It explained the situation clearly and offered a solution. We proposed a legal easement agreement, something fair, something that would allow them continued access while respecting my ownership. All they had to do was acknowledge reality and work with me. Their response, they ignored it completely. Instead, they doubled down. More letters, more complaints, more attempts to pressure me into backing off. At one point, Richard even showed up at the edge of my property and told me directly that they would handle things their way if I kept pushing. That was the moment everything shifted for me, because now it was not just about land anymore. It was about entitlement. So I stopped trying to cooperate. I told my lawyer to prepare everything necessary to enforce my property rights. We reviewed local laws, access regulations, and every possible angle. And one thing became very clear. I was within my rights to restrict access to that road. Completely. But I did not act immediately. I waited. Weeks passed. The HOA continued acting like nothing had changed. Cars driving in and out, deliveries coming through, residents going about their daily lives without a clue. And then, one night, I made my move. I chose 3 a.m. for a reason. No traffic, no distractions, no chance of interference. I had already arranged everything legally. Notices had been filed, requirements met. There was nothing stopping me. As I sat in that bulldozer, looking at the road they had taken for granted for years, I thought about how easily all of this could have been avoided. A simple agreement, a little respect, that is all it would have taken. But instead, they chose arrogance. So I lowered the blade and started tearing into the asphalt. The sound echoed through the quiet night as the road broke apart section by section. It did not take long to make it completely unusable. By the time I was done, the only road connecting that entire HOA neighborhood to the outside world was gone. The next morning was exactly what you would expect. Confusion first, then panic. Cars lining up, people getting out, trying to understand what happened. Some thought it was construction, others thought it was damage. Then the reality hit. They were cut off. Completely. Within hours, my phone started blowing up. Calls from unknown numbers, messages, even emails. And then Richard showed up. He was furious, demanding answers, threatening legal action, saying I had no right to do this. For the first time, I did not argue. I just told him to talk to my lawyer, because everything I had done was already backed by law. Over the next few days, things got intense. Emergency access had to be arranged. Temporary solutions were put in place, but none of them were convenient. The HOA tried to fight it legally, but they had a problem. They had no documented right to that road. Their years of using it meant nothing without legal backing. Eventually, reality caught up with them. They came back to the table. This time, their tone was very different. No more threats. No more arrogance. Just urgency. We negotiated a proper easement agreement, one that recognized my ownership and compensated accordingly. Terms that should have been agreed on from the beginning. And just like that, everything could function again. The road was rebuilt, access restored, but the dynamic had completely changed. They no longer saw me as someone they could push around, and I never had another issue with that HOA again. If you made it this far, I want to know what you think. Did they bring this on themselves? Or was shutting down the road too extreme even if it was legal? Drop your thoughts in the comments and share this with someone who loves stories where entitlement meets reality. And if you want more stories like this, do not forget to like and subscribe to Karen's Stories Daily, because sometimes the biggest lessons come from the people who thought they were in control.